Hello, I'm CJ Werleman, and this week we reveal how and why foreign mercenaries are helping Israel commit genocide in Gaza. But first, a quick reminder to like and subscribe to our show. Now let's get into it. Last week, one of the world's most prestigious science journals estimated that nearly 200,000 Palestinians will be killed by Israel's direct and indirect actions, making Gaza officially the largest genocide in the 21st century. But one of the key aspects that was overlooked by the Lancet and the mainstream media is how Israel's recruitment of foreign mercenaries is one of the primary drivers behind what has become a Holocaust-level rate of mass murder. This must be discussed, because when we talk about foreign mercenaries, we are talking about professional killers, guns for hire, and trained assassins who take pleasure from the business of murder. We are talking about Jews from America, Europe and Africa who have been recruited by the Zionist regime to commit unspeakable acts of evil in the Palestinian territory. One mercenary told a Spanish news agency that Israel paid him a weekly salary of $4,000 to kill Palestinians. But even worse than that are reports in which others have been paid bonuses for every confirmed kill. This is the incentivization of genocide. Now I will share with you the nature and source of these payments. But let me first introduce you to an American mercenary in Gaza. You will hear his southern accent.
We'll burn their city to the ground. Yeah. I will find every rat hole that they hide in. And I will drop down enough explosives to scare God Almighty. You promise, gentlemen? Promise that I give to you before God Almighty. It is hunt season in Gaza. You will all be well fed before this is done.
Having studied the psychological nature of war crimes at college, I can tell you that highly trained, professional armies rarely commit massacres against unarmed civilian populations. Atrocities are typically carried out by poorly trained conscripts, ideologically driven militias, and mercenary forces. In Gaza, we have seen one atrocity committed after another. We have seen entire families tied up and executed in cold blood. We've seen women gunned down while waving white flags. We've seen groups of old men rounded up, stripped naked, and shot where they stood in the freezing cold. This is the dastardly handiwork of Israel's mercenary forces, of which tens of thousands have been rotated through the Palestinian territory since October of last year. We are talking about 20,000 Americans, 4,000 French citizens, 1,000 Australians, 1,000 Italians, and 400 Indians, with thousands more collectively from Ukraine, Germany, Russia, Canada, and South Africa.
يزداد الاعتقاد لدى مجاهدينا بأن العدو يستخدم المرتزقة خلال عمليته التي يدعي أنها حرب وجود وكرامة وطنية. كشف كم هو جيش واهن وجبان ولا يعرف شيئا عن الأخلاق، ولا يعتمد على مقاتليه بل على تكنولوجيا وأدوات صماء. وعندما تحين لحظة الحقيقة والمواجهة تجدهم يهربون ويصرخون ويستغيثون كالأطفال.
The Zionist army openly admits that US citizens account for 10% of all Israeli military casualties in Gaza, with Hamas claiming it killed at least 7 Ukrainian mercenaries in a single ambush in February. I mean, imagine fleeing your own country while it's under attack from a foreign army to travel to the other side of the world to kill Palestinians. This takes a special kind of psycho. More recently, we reported how soldiers of Indian origin have been deployed to Gaza and how they're responsible for some of the worst massacres in the territory, therefore making the Hindu-for-Zionist alliance stronger than it has ever been before. And as is the case with Israeli soldiers, all of these foreign fighters enjoy complete immunity, which explains why they behave in such a ruthless and reckless manner and then take to social media to brag about their crimes. Watch a French mercenary vowing to massacre every Palestinian in Gaza.
Ici le capitaine Looping, il va vous amener à Gaza. Ça va chier, c'était super. Ça va chier, ça va chier. On va les massacrer, les massacrer.
Prominent Israeli Holocaust scholar Raz Segal says genocide is the culmination of a process that turns the world upside down. The upside-down nature of this genocide has Western governments treating Jewish mercenaries as returning heroes, rather than the mass-murdering terrorists that they are. like you see here with the former UK Prime Minister greeting British citizens who have returned to the UK after participating in genocide. This is the definition of evil. Now I want to share with you the story of my friend Mustafa Abu Suleiman, a relationship I have written about for an Australian newspaper. His story highlights the double standard in the way Western governments treat Muslims who travel to foreign battlefields. Mustafa travelled from his hometown of Sydney, Australia, to Syria in 2012, after watching the world do nothing to stop the Assad regime from shooting, bombing and gassing innocent civilians. He told me that as a Muslim, he had a religious duty to defend the victims of oppression and, in this case, the Syrian people. But he wasn't a trained soldier, and he had never even picked up a rifle in his life. He was no mercenary. He was a humanitarian who was willing to sacrifice his life in trying to save others less fortunate than him. Mustafa is the living embodiment of heroism. He's one of my personal heroes. You see, unlike Jewish mercenaries who traveled to Israel to participate in a genocide, Mustafa traveled to Syria to defend victims of a genocide. But from the moment he set foot on Syrian soil, the Australian government determined him to be a terrorist. No ifs, no buts, no investigation. From their perspective, any Muslim who travels to a war zone is a violent jihadist, case closed. Even though he fought against ISIS and not with the terror group. The government has since stripped him of his citizenship, leaving him trapped in Syria and permanently separated from his wife, daughter and parents in Australia. Proving once again that there's one rule for Muslims and another set of rules for Jews. Sadly, however, his story is a familiar one to so many Muslim families, including the case of my friend Torquay Fox, a British humanitarian aid worker who travelled to Syria to deliver food, water and medicine to civilians displaced by the conflict. But because he's a Muslim, the UK government labelled him a terrorist and stripping him of his citizenship, leaving him languishing in Syria, where he still to this day provides comfort and aid to civilians and, I might add, produces smart social media content to highlight the Western world's shameless hypocrisy.
Why is it that as a Brit, if I was to put this on and carry this and take part in a genocide, I'll be protected and held as a hero? Yet if I was to wear this and carry this and defend the lives of innocent people, all of a sudden I will be labelled a terrorist. Actually, wait a minute. Forget about fighting. Brits like me were stripped of our citizenships for merely handing out aid. Contrast this with perverted British Zionists like Levi Simon, who have the gall to film themselves rummaging through the private clothing of a woman in Gaza and post it all over social media with no fear of repercussion.
So this is where we are. Jewish mercenaries are free to travel to Palestine to mass murder Palestinians for sport and without having to face any consequences at home. This has to stop, and we can help bring an end to this heinous practice by exposing and raising awareness about the Zionist organizations that recruit Jewish fighters in America, Europe and elsewhere. One of those groups is the US-based charity Friends of the IDF, which raises money from individual donors to recruit Jewish kids from all over the world, using slick propaganda and the lure of permanent residency in the occupied Palestinian territories. Israel calls these recruits lone soldiers.
Hola, mi nombre es Dalia Levine, tengo 20 años.
I arrived in Israel 4 months ago from Cape Town, South Africa.
मैं बॉम्बे इंडिया से हूँ.
Florida, USA, Tampa Bay.
Азербайджаннан.
Гватемала. Türkiye'den, İstanbul'dan.
Приехал я год назад с Киева, Украина.
It should be obvious that if Israel is charged with committing genocide and crimes against humanity, then Jewish foreign fighters are guilty of committing these very same crimes. These Jews are bona fide terrorists, which means their home countries have a responsibility to act accordingly. And thankfully, some governments are now moving to criminalize Jewish mercenaries, with South Africa announcing it will prosecute or even strip citizenship of South African nationals who have joined the Israeli army and are fighting in Gaza. And they could start by arresting a South African Jewish mercenary who taunted and mocked his victims.
This is LFT. I'm coming to you live from Khan Yunis. Everything is okay, everything is fine, No problems, no more explosions. What was it? My God! Everything's not okay. My God, what was that?
South Africa isn't alone. In France, a bill has been introduced to investigate 4,000 French citizens fighting with Israeli forces. And in the Netherlands, a pro-Palestinian group has already filed 7 complaints against Dutch Jews currently fighting for the Zionist killing machine in Gaza. Other countries must now follow their lead. It's not enough to convict Israeli leaders at The Hague. We must also convict those who killed innocent men, women and children at point-blank range and with racist hatred in their hearts. We cannot allow the perpetrators of genocide to walk freely amongst us, because allowing them to do so will only encourage future genocides. The words "never again" must also apply to Palestinians. But that's my time for today. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and we kindly ask you please support our effort to expose and confront injustices in the Muslim world by becoming a member of this show at patreon.com/CJWerleman. We can't produce, sustain and grow this show without your help, and we offer exclusive content and benefits to those who do. But for now, good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and stay blessed.